Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start in about 2 or 3 minutes. Hopefully the room will fill up a little bit more. Thank you. Are you guys ready? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is Neil Rogers. I'm the president of the Thornhill Club. Tonight is our fall information session for members, where we bring forward to the members some of the activities, some of the results of the year so far. I'm going to say some very quick opening remarks. We have some tough competition tonight in terms of the choices that members have made. The Raptors are playing, the Leafs are playing, Game 1 of the World Series. So for those of you who have made it, I appreciate it very much. We appreciate it as a board very much. We are also online and want to welcome any online viewers who may be with us tonight. For those of you online, if you have a particular question after the presentations have concluded, or during the presentations, I should say, and you wish to ask a question, you can do so by emailing Joe Murphy. His email address is jmurphy@thornhillgcc.com, and we will make every effort to answer your questions. I'm also joined here tonight by a number of my colleagues on the board. Maria Gatsios, who's our facilities committee and tennis champion. our treasurer. Brenda Berry, our governance chairperson. Carolyn Wright, our golf executive committee member. And have I missed anyone? Neil McDonald, our membership committee director. Thank you all for your service. We're going to go over the 2020 operating plan, and Joe Murphy, our COO, will walk us through that. Kevin Greer will then do 2 presentations with respect to our financial year-end update, as well as the capital reserve study. I will wrap up the meeting with an update regarding our facilities master plan, and we'll be happy to take any questions from the floor at the conclusion of the presentation. So, Joe, may I have you lead off tonight, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I know how it feels to be part of the People's Party of Canada. Is this somebody? Sorry, I hope none of you out there are supporters of them. I'm just going to run through some quick results and talk about our operations from this past year, and a little bit about what's planned for next year. Kevin will talk about some of the financial results, and then we'll move into part of the meat of the meeting, I guess. So let's start off. Brent, you'll just flip along there. We're going to talk about membership development. This year, we actually acquired 65 new members, 65 new golf members. That's broken down between 35 long course and 30 valley. Now, that sounds like a lot, but oddly enough, it's less than we have taken in previously. As a matter of fact, you'll see as part of our numbers, we're about 8 to 10 short this year, which significantly impacts some of our entrance fee numbers, and you'll see how those flush out later. But again, part of our challenge is attrition as well. We understand, we try to study membership demographics, where it's going. Our attrition's up almost to about 6% this year versus 5.5% last year. So that, when you take a look at the overall golf membership at roughly 750, including the Valley, those numbers can add up pretty quickly. So you hope that attrition stays lower. Most of the reasons why people are leaving, it's primarily going out of golf. Perhaps it's a few injuries, or they move out of the country or out of the town. So it's a constant challenge. But I want to remind you that our best marketing force is you and our membership. 85%. That's still what it was last year. 85% of our new members come through our existing members. So that's a critical mass that we rely on. And even though we do explore social media outlets, and we're trying to run alongside of Facebook and Instagram, where we periodically appear, and we do a search engine marketing. Those are great and those are helpful, and we need a presence in the marketplace. But by and large, our new members come from our existing members. The other factor here is we have about 20 new Clubhouse Active members, but they tend to be more transient. People that come in, and the Clubhouse Actives are members who enjoy the facility, everything but golf. So like they would use the fitness, the curling, the tennis, and so on. And we're getting marginal growth there, but we're finding people are leaving it as well. So we'll continue to focus on that in the months ahead. The other area that we constantly look for, because the growth to the golf is, as many of you know, is difficult. There isn't a lot of new to golf people in the industry. I mean, we study that a lot. I'm sure you read that a lot, particularly if you read the Globe today. We literally look to clubs that are falling away or looking to, or the membership's looking to move. We've had a significant number of members over the past few years come from Club Link, for example. In the next year, we'll be looking at York Downs, and there's been a lot of people knocking at the door from York Downs, and we're very interested in that group. I mean, they're used to clubs, they understand clubs, they know what it's like to support clubs and the community of a club. So I think that's important that we really look at those markets, and we've been invited to speak to York Downs over the winter period, along with a few other clubs. But I'd like to think that we have an advantage. We certainly have attracted a few so far. We hope to fill up the remaining numbers of members over the next year. Some of our golf course priorities this past year, you'll see the number of rounds. We're up almost 2,000 rounds over last year, and that's in a shorter period of time. If you recall, we didn't have a spring. We didn't really get going until the early part of June. So we're up at 1,800 rounds, which kind of begs the question, what is that doing to our golf course? We'll talk about that in a moment, but the rounds, I mean, we're sensitive to that, and here's the parallel you draw between the numbers of members, the numbers of rounds, tee access, and so on. So it's important, and we constantly review that. Our quotas of members, as you saw earlier, it's 6.25. We've capped it at about 600 for this year, as from a budgetary standpoint. And we may look at that, well, that might be as high as we can go, because we're on pace now to probably do over 27,000 rounds of golf. That's a lot on an 18-hole golf course, particularly in a season that was short. That was all done pretty well. Todd, you're here. That was done, right from June right through to September. That's 4 months that we've had 25,000 rounds of golf. I know our course suffered at times. One of the things that we're very sensitive to is how do we improve conditions. So the board has approved a budget that puts almost another 10%, which equates to about another $150,000 into the conditioning of the golf course. I mean, that is our lifeblood. That's why we're here. We have to ensure that that jewel remains in good condition as much as possible throughout the year. I mean, there are certain times with heat that it does get stressed out. But again, Greg and his team do everything they can, and with a little bit more labor, a little bit more attention to some of the detail with extra labor, how we cut our greens, and so on, that money will go a long way, and you should see improved conditioning with that number of rounds. The other area that we're talking about is the increased awareness of members' care to the golf course. That's going to come up again as part of our survey, but the members' care is always under scrutiny. Raking of bunkers. I know everybody in this room is exempt from that, but the replacement of divots, ball marks. I mean, I constantly hear how people are not doing that. I never know who isn't doing it. Because if you ever see anybody doing it, send me a confidential email. I promise I won't disclose who told me, but I think people need to be reminded of their responsibility out on the golf course. That's critical, the overall conditioning. The projects that we're going to undertake this fall is the 5th tee. We've announced that. We're going to move the 5th tee, and I'm always concerned, Mr. President, as to what direction is that moving in. Is it north or it is? It's actually we're moving the tees. Notice how he said the north. I said we move them to the right, because I mean if you're standing, that's what we're moving. We're moving the entire tee complex to the right. We're taking the path around under the embankment, and there's actually going to be new drainage installed in there. There'll be it's going to be a little bit longer, Renzo. We're looking at taking it back another few yards, hopefully so you can play. Because it's not a tough enough hole as it is. I think you need to be a little bit longer back there. But I think we're also mindful of the integrity of the bank, but we are going to try to thin out a little bit of trees to create more air movement and sunlight penetration. The York Region Sewer Project, that is, I know we've talked a little bit about it, and there hasn't been a lot of press about it, but that is actually going to proceed just after the golf course closes, probably mid-November. And what's likely to happen is, you'll see up there, I won't go through all that, you'll see how, where they're starting, but how it affects our course is that they're going to come in behind the 3rd green, they're going to go along the left side of 4, across the river, down by one valley, and in front of the 18th green, and then ultimately into the practice range. Now, they promised that all this work would be done by March 31st. That's what they claim. Now, some of the golf course restoration, which shouldn't really affect play on the 3rd green, because it's in behind 3 green, then along the left, because again, very few of you go in the rough on the left of 4, so you shouldn't be too worried about that. And then you're in the valley. Some of the valley might be a little disrupted, but where it runs into a bit of a challenge is on the practice range. There will be a lot of disruption to that. But the good news out of that is they promise to restore it better than you know it today. And I can say better than, I won't get into all the particulars, but it will be an improvement for sure. And that should be done certainly no later than the end of May. So I'm not sure when we'd actually get you onto the practice range, but I think when we do get you on there, it'll be an improved area for practice. Move on, Brent, thanks. The F&B and golf operations, I picked these two only because it's an area where our members are most affected from a service perspective. Food and beverage service improvements is ongoing. We've done mini surveys, we've done comment cards. We believe we're hearing you. We believe we're moving the needle on some of these areas. The survey is, the actual satisfaction survey is about to go out at the end of this week. So hopefully you feel the same. I certainly get a lot of anecdotal comments about the food and the service is better this year. So I'd like to, hopefully that's reflected in the comments. It was, again, a great summer weather-wise, very busy. Pizza Oven, of course, is our #1 seller. Surprise, surprise. It's in the thousands. I mean, it's hard to get an exact count, but it's well into the thousands of pizzas that we sell every year. So it's a big hit for us. We're trying to figure out how we can do it year-round. It's a tough one without having to build it inside, so that might be part of something that we would see in the future. things that we'll look for in 2020 is, again, more menu selections, service logistics, trying to figure out a better and faster way to get that food to you. Hours of operations are generally okay, but I think that there's opportunity just to be a little more efficient there. Into the golf operations, it's a busy season. Todd tells me he does approximately 180 events a year. 180 golf events. That's pretty good, Todd. Wow. The focus on service in the back shop and in the golf shop is an area we constantly work at. We had several new employees this year, so we're looking at that and how to continually improve those services for our members. Improve starter services. We've had mixed reviews about our starters, but we do believe that's an important and a necessary service that we will continue to focus on. But part of our challenge is, in this market, which we're finding over the last, say, 20 years, it's becoming increasingly difficult to secure seasonal employees, particularly in our traditional ways of doing it, which are often university or high school employees. It's getting very thin. We have to look at different markets in order to get more staff. For example, maybe going to the early retirement markets. We have I think I told this story, we have a retired employee who was in early retirement, had no idea that country clubs even hire people. Oh, that was interesting. But it's interesting when corporate life, people just don't understand about country clubs. We have to get into those markets and look for people that are prepared to work and prepared to commit to what we have to offer here. Training, of course, will continue as always, and we're investing more into training with every budget year. Centennial update. I see Howard's in the room. Howard, everybody know who Howard Back is? Howard's our Centennial Chair. He is, it's hard to believe we formed this committee 2 years ago, and we thought, we have lots of time, we don't need it. All of a sudden, it's in pretty well 2 years, everything has to be ready to go. Quick update, Centennial publication is being written by Lorne Rubenstein, and he's making very good progress. And we hope to see some interesting documents by this time next year. Celebrations are being planned. There includes a major gala event. It even includes a private labeled wine for those, and we're all looking for taste testers. Do we have any volunteers out here for, all the ones in the back there, okay. And then the board has approved a couple of events. The Ontario Scotties Curling, we've held it here before. Michelle, what year was that? 2011. So that's back in 22. That was very successful for the club. The Men's Canadian Mid-Am was recently approved by the board, and that's going to be held in August of 22 as part of our centennial celebrations. We're looking at a tennis event. I see Marie and Jack are going to try to get Bianca Andreescu here by 22. I feel she should just be about her prime right about that year, right? Yeah, that's right. So we'll have a full schedule of events as we get a bit closer. So that really ends my part of the presentation tonight. What I would like to say, though, and we'll continue to focus on driving our revenues, cost management, cost effectiveness. It's important that our club continues to have surpluses and that we can add to our capital reserves. And again, I'll repeat, the membership satisfaction survey should be out the end of this week, and we look forward to your participation.
From a financial perspective, as long as we can replace members at the same or greater pace. Remember that initiation fees are a source of cash used to fund capital. From an operating result, we see continued improvement. You may recall back in 2015 and 16, we had some large deficiencies at the operating line, which was a concern, as this was a drain on cash. The focus over the last 3 years has been returned to a positive operating result, and as you can see that has been achieved. And the key driver, of course, has been increased membership levels. So let's take a look at preliminary operating results. As we saw from the previous slide, the preliminary operating result is a surplus of about $33,000. This compares to a budget of about $100,000, so we are below target on that metric. The primary reasons for that are food and beverage and curling. So this variance is driven by labor variances, and the recent changes in minimum wages have somewhat been disruptive to our labor model. Management is finding it increasingly challenging to find and retain strong talent, and it has been required to shift the wage scale in order to address this issue. For fiscal year 20, management has presented the board and has approved a budget to deliver $100,000 surplus. These modest surplus help to generate cash to fund capital spending and eventually build reserves, and we'll talk a bit more about reserves in a minute. So our overall results are our bottom line results. So from a bottom line perspective, our preliminary results indicate a negative bottom line or deficiency of about $120,000. As a refresher, the bottom line is after capital income and expenses. The key driver of this variance is entrance fee revenue, which was about $170,000 short relative to plan. We were not able to grow the long course memberships at the rate greater than attrition, and we did not hit our membership targets for fiscal year 19. However, management is optimistic for next year, now that our major construction projects are complete, and next year will be the first full year of undisrupted service, no construction, in which we can showcase the beautiful pool and cabana and help attract families looking for a full club experience. Some other key financial metrics that are that it appears that we will finish the year with a positive cash balance. We have paid down debt by about $200,000 this year of the total $5.6 million loan, and life to date on that loan we've paid down about $438,000. Another key metric is to ensure that we are on side with our bank covenants. In the spirit of transparency, we will share with you that we are marginally close to being in breach of those covenants at year end. This was due to a higher than expected capital spend to complete the cabana, which was a result of changing the vendor mid-project. So the bank has been informed of this, that we may be offside subject to audit, and they have assured us that it is not a concern given the magnitude of the variance as well as the quality of the underlying collateral. So let's move on to our capital reserve study update. So if you read the most recent Board of Director and COO update, you will know that we are implementing an increase in capital maintenance fees for next year. Now, no one likes fee increases, but our goal here today is to help you understand why management and the board feel it is necessary while acting in the best interest of the club and at the same time being respectful to the membership. So let's start with some background information. Recall from our previous financial slide that in 2015 and 16, the club was running large deficiencies at the operating line. Our initial focus over the last 3 years has been to return the club to a positive operating position. This was critical as operating losses are cash losses. During the last 5-year period, capital demand has exceeded funding, resulting in a CapEx deficit. So saying that another way, we did not have enough cash to satisfy all the capital spending required to maintain the facility, and now the facilities are in need of a catch-up to maintain the quality and to maintain their useful lives. Recognizing this, management and the board took action and developed a plan to address this issue. The club retained Burnside an outside engineering firm, to perform a review of all assets in order to determine the remaining useful life of the existing assets, as well as the estimated cost to maintain or replace them. So what was the outcome of that analysis? Well, the outcome of the analysis was an estimated capital spend of about $16 million in today's dollars over the next 25 years, or on average about $640,000 a year. Now note, this is not to improve the facilities. This is just to maintain the assets in the function and form that exist today. I want to pause here, as this is a critical piece of information that will provide context to the facilities master planning discussion that Neil Rogers will update us on later this evening. So let's look at some key facts here. Now, although the capital study looked out 25 years, we want to break this into two discussions, a short-term view and a long-term horizon. We need to understand that the short-term implications, while at the same time, not losing sight of our longer-term facilities master plan. For this purpose, the short-term discussion, let's focus on the next 3 years. So the Burnside study indicated spending requirements over the next 3 years of about $2.4 million. Now, we could have engaged other firms and we may have gotten slightly different estimates here. And these are, figures looking way out, so, costs may escalate over time. We haven't got quotes on these, but these are the numbers that we've used for the purpose of this study. This compares to a historical spend of about $550,000 a year. So as you can see, if our funding remained at that level, these historical levels, we would not be able to fund this required spending. And in fact, there'd be a gap of about $800,000 over the 3-year period, which is clearly a problem. So let's take a little deeper dive and a breakdown on spending. So more specifically, spending from an activity perspective. So as you can see, this is a different view of the $2.4 million. You can see that golf is the largest spend, which includes improvements to greens, tee complexes, replacement of practice range netting poles. For clubhouse, we have drainage pipe repairs, roof repairs, electrical distribution panels, electrical and HVAC equipment. And for curling, we have compressor controls, tube chillers, heating and electrical. So now let's look at the fee structure and more specifically how this will impact the major categories. So we haven't put every category up here. We just wanted to provide you with an illustration of the major categories. So something to keep in mind is that the existing monthly fees have been in place for several years and do not necessarily equate to the projected spending over the next 3 years. So to say that another way, this review was an opportunity to clean up these fees and improve the overall logic of our fee structure. So just a bit of a background on the approach we took here. Our controller, Jason Mail, who's here tonight, performed a detailed analysis on spending by category, and then looked at the membership categories, and then mapped the usage of the assets back to the membership category. Through a process of dividing the cost by the number of people in the category, we had a first cut per category. When the board looked at this first cut and sort of looked at the impact of that, that really stimulated a lot of discussion. The first cut revealed some very significant percentage increases by category, and some were so big that we as a board were concerned about attrition and our ability to attract new members relative to other options that they may have. So through a series of back and forth discussions and probably about 4 iterations, the board approved this recommendation. So it's not perfect, but we do feel that it is reasonable and defensible. So let's look at a few examples, and let's start with the seasonal curler. That today, if you're a seasonal curler, you're paying $14 a month for 6 months. We're proposing an increase to $34 a month for that 6 months. And that represents an increase of $120 a year for a total payment of $204. So using that logic again, if you're a long course golfer and you're not a curler, your fees would go up $60. but if you are a curler, you add in the 120, and so your fees go up by 180. So in conclusion, the board has approved this recommendation while acting in the best interest of the club and its long-term sustainability. This decision is considered prudent and proactive in order to get ahead of the projected spending, while at the same time smooth out the financial impact to our members. These fees will be reviewed annually to ensure they are still appropriate, while at the same time staying informed about the long-term planning process and any new information that this process might bring. Thank you for your interest and attention. We welcome your questions at the end of the presentation, and I will now turn you over to Neil Rogers, our club president, for an update on our Facilities Master Planning Committee.
Good evening. I am tasked with bringing everyone up to speed with the efforts that the Facilities Master Plan Committee is making. This group was assembled back in late 2018. The chair of that committee is Darren Thompson, a former board member, men's captain. He's well known throughout the club, and he brings excellent expertise to the committee. The mandate, I just want to refresh everyone's minds about the mandate and the responsibilities of this committee. Its primary mandate was to develop a comprehensive master plan for the club, inclusive of the clubhouse, related facilities, including the Golf Pro Shop, the first tee complex, which we will call the clubhouse and area. They were also tasked with preparing a comprehensive financial analysis to determine the capital expenditures of the club's maintenance of current assets and consideration of any new or upgraded facilities as may be proposed in the master plan. The responsibilities were to consider all potential funding and revenue options of any new or upgraded facilities of the clubhouse and area, and consider potential any long-term real estate strategies on the club's lands that may facilitate the capital expenditures required for any repair, maintenance, and or renovation construction of the club house and area. So for much of the winter of 2019, we were considering, and I say we because I sit on that committee obviously, we were considering various ideas and options. Remind you that back in the fall of 18 and the winter of 19, we held some focus groups and some surveys with members and asked them what their opinions were on what they felt were necessary facilities as part of an upgrade renovation to the club. But in the meantime, some events changed in the first half of this past year. April 2019, the province announced funding for the Yonge Street subway extension north to Richmond Hill. The following month, the province approved new legislation and policies which mandate intensification and higher densities around transit stations, including subways, and municipalities are compelled to bring their official plans and planning documents to be consistent with the provincial policy. Later that year, or this past summer, local governments confirmed their support, and what I mean by that is the town of Markham, region of York, confirmed their support for the previously to be determined Royal Orchard subway station on Yonge Street, which is planned and to be situated just outside the entrance to the club on our Yonge Street frontage. And as you could expect, with these announcements, land values for sites along Yonge Street have been increasing and rising in value. Next, please. I think it's safe to say that the Facilities Master Plan has got two options available to it the Facilities Master Plan Committee and the club has two options available. We'll call it the status quo, and that would be to simply maintain the clubhouse and area facilities as we know it today. Keep in mind that maintaining simply the status quo would require a capital maintenance infusion of about $6.5 million over the 25-year period, and that comes from the Burnside study, and that does not include furniture, fixtures, and equipment. The other option is to continue to improve the club as a family and four-season club, which is consistent with our strategic plan. We would always have a golf and facilities first approach to reimagining our clubhouse and area. And that speaks to what I said earlier about the members' surveyed expectations of a tee complex, a new pro shop, indoor golf simulators, enhanced member casual dining, and increased patio dining spaces. So under both of those options, thank you, under both of those options, the membership, and I want to emphasize the membership and the board have a few considerations to make. Under the status quo option, that would need to be funded as a minimum. There are a number of mechanisms to fund whatever that might amount to. There's obviously debt, capital dues, capital assessments, or monetizing surplus clubhouse and area lands. Under the reno rebuild options, similar ideas or methods are applicable here as well as what I just previously mentioned. Next, please. Let's talk about monetizing potential surplus club lands. And we're talking again about the clubhouse and area. Repeat, the clubhouse and area. If we reconsider how to use the space, perhaps we may have surplus land beyond what the club requires for all of our desired uses and functions. And if, after that analysis, there is surplus land resulting from a golf and facilities first approach, it could generate funding for club priorities. The club's actions to date have been effectively twofold. Once the town of Markham and the region of York penned their support for the Royal Orchard subway station, the board sent a letter supporting that decision to the municipal governments, provincial governments, indicating that we were supportive of that decision. That is an important decision we felt not only for the club, for our members, and for our employees. The board has also taken initiatives to get involved in local land use planning processes regarding the potential intensification of the Yonge Street corridor, which may include some of the club's clubhouse and area lands. So the next steps. Through the lead of the Facilities Master Plan Committee, both them and the board will prepare options for the clubhouse and area, which we need to consider alongside means to address our current debt obligations, to address our CapEx maintenance needs, to address capital improvements to our golf course and club assets, and deliver improved facilities for future generations of our members. As I've said before, this is what I'm calling Thornhill 2.0. It's a watershed opportunity for us as we enter our centennial year as to what this club would be for the next 100 years. So the action items are that the Facilities Master Plan is working on identifying some options for the clubhouse and area space, and we hope to have that wrapped up sometime in January of next year. The board will continue its ongoing land use planning participation efforts. We envision that in In the spring of next year, there will be a lot of member consultation and open houses showing the options or the ideas, the concepts, if I can say it that way, for the clubhouse and area. Part and parcel of that will be the funding strategies that may be available for us as a membership to decide on. And then with that feedback, the board will bring forward an action plan and a recommended strategy to members in the spring of 2020. That wraps up the portion that I wanted to speak to on the facilities master plan, and that is really the end of the presentation. You are free to ask us questions, and we'll do our very best to address them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan Rudolph. I've been a member now for 3 years, and this is the first meeting like this that I've attended, and I appreciate the diligence that the board and management have put through to put this information in front of us. And I appreciate the fact that as a club you need to keep everything up and make capital expenditures, because this is something that we want to be able to enjoy from years to come, and we want to bring guests here, and we want to be proud of it. But the thing that sort of resonates in my mind is that we are continually, over the last number of years, having an operating cash flow deficit after paying back debt. And we're almost at full capacity with regard to our members. What steps are being taken to ensure that we can get that cash flow positive? And has any analysis been done by the internal accounting group to be able to determine what kind of profits or cash flow are generated from the different streams of business that you have?
Okay. Joe or Kevin, who's best to address that?
Thanks, Alan. Good question. As Kevin alluded to, we've come a long way of getting out of operating deficits. Overall, we still are running deficits. Part of the solution is what we're talking about as far as our capital reserve study, so that will certainly help. The other area that we really have to drill down on is just cost effectiveness. Like, what can we do? I mean, we're a year-round facility, we're growing, but how can we be more efficient at what we do? Which will hopefully put us in a position where we're starting to see some surpluses. It hasn't really come to fruition yet, and we have some thoughts and ideas. But for the longer-term strategy, we just have to try to match our CapEx requirements opposite what we at least drive from our surpluses and of course the capital levies. And that's really the only assurance I can, because you're right, it's kind of bordering right on the line at the moment. We have to figure out a way to get us out of this sort of hovering around that zero mark or slightly below. Did you want to add anything to that, Kevin?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So I'll tell you a little bit about our budgeting process, because we do actually do a cash flow projection each year as part of our budgeting process. And we determine what our net free cash flow is available for CapEx. And then that is compared to the requests that management makes for capital spending. And so what we do is we approve up to a neutral cash position. So we don't approve spending that would take us into a negative cash position for the year. And then we put it upon management to monitor that spending through the year. And if it looks like we are going to be short from our original cash projection, the expectation would be to pare back that CapEx. But as you can see, that over time, the demand for CapEx has always exceeded the funding. And that's really a big part of why we're here today, saying, we see the demand for the next 3 years being higher than our projected cash flow. So we need some additional cash flow to fund that capital. But the bigger picture here, of course, is that, do we want to maintain this facility for the next 50 years as it is, or do we want to think bigger than that? And that's really what the Facilities Master Planning Committee is how do we get through the next 3 years in the short term, but what's the bigger vision here in the longer term?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to ask a follow-up question. I appreciate the fact that, we have to provide funds for capital expenditures. That's very important. But my question was more relating to the fundamentals of making sure that we have enough cash flow from operations after paying back debt. Nothing to do with capital expenditures. We're almost at full capacity, as I said before, with regard to golf. How much profit is the golf course providing? How much cash flow profit has the curling providing? And how much cash flow is the food and beverage providing? That's information that would be very useful to members because, we're prepared to put if it makes sense. But if we're just keep on feeding the organization and they're not making it, and there's no plan to make a profit, it's just going to be a constant contribution by members.
So just to clarify that the operating line is really where we're trying to break even or generate a modest surplus. Below the line, we actually have multiple sources of funding. We have our entrance fee receivable and our capital maintenance fees. So those, although we might actually have a negative bottom line, we can actually still be cash positive just because we have $1 million in depreciation included in that number. But I think I understand your question better in terms of looking at it by line of business. What's the contribution from golf? What's the contribution from non-golf related activities? So we actually did do that analysis this year, and both golf and non-golf related activities do generate a positive contribution. Food and beverage actually has a small negative contribution, and that is really the nature of our food and beverage model. One of the challenges with our food and beverage model is it's staffed every night with a kitchen and waiting staff, but people don't always show up, so that's fixed cost that has to be absorbed. So, we do make money some nights on food and beverage, but on nights where we're not using the capacity, we do have a negative contribution. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hi. My name's Bram Rosen, and actually, you sort of touched on what I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways, and it's to do with food and beverage. And you mentioned that it has somewhat of a negative result, and in my previous review of the financial statements, it's usually break even or a small negative, and that I believe was without any allocation for rent as we own the land. But on the other side, every year at the beginning of the year, within 5% or 6%, you know what the revenue is going to be for food and beverage, and it's a pretty large number. If restaurants did that number and knew at the beginning of the year, they would make a lot of money from that, unless they were poorly run. But notwithstanding that you know that the revenue is going to be, and I don't remember the number, between $3 and $4 million a year, and you know that sort of the pattern of revenues, I'm not saying to the hour, but you know that it's highly concentrated June, July, and August. I'm not sure why you can't make 15% margin. The prices are not low. They're not being subsidized. They're market prices. Yet you can't make 15%, which in this course on $3 million or $3.5 million would be $500,000. $500,000 more cash flow or profit, however you want to do it, and you wouldn't necessarily, either you could have more money available for capital expenditures, or you wouldn't have to go to the members for an extra 2% and $50 a month every single year. There's something wrong, and I'm not sure that it's properly looked into, and I would recommend that you look more closely into the food and beverage and figure out why the model isn't working. And it can't just be because of you don't know how many staff you have on different evenings. It's got to be a more fundamental issue than that. And that's, to me, low-hanging fruit to create more cash flow for the club. And just one other quick question, I'll ask it now. How much was the negative variance on the Cabana project? I mean, it's been mentioned, and on the pool project for that matter. Like, what was the what was the cost overrun as opposed to the original budgets? Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, let me speak to the food and beverage question first. So, great question. You know, if you sat on the finance committee, that's a question that we ask quite often, is trying to understand this food and beverage model, because it is a little different than a restaurant model. And so on the surface, when you start to look at it, you look at the prices, you look at the margins, they look pretty healthy. But on a deeper dive, it's really looking at the labor side of that drives us negative. So again, it's basically a model where the expectation from the members is that the restaurant is open each night, and regardless of whether people show up, those people get paid. So it is a challenge. I don't have the solution. I think if we had a better predictability on when members are going to show up through reservations, that could help us. But I'm going to turn it over to Joe, because Joe and I have had several conversations about this, and he can give you a bit of insight into the food and beverage model within the club industry.
Bram, it's a question often asked, and you know, as a restaurateur standing back looking at $3 million revenue, I mean, they'd have a heart attack at the fact that, you know, we aren't making, it would probably be much higher than 15 points. But first of all, I think you have to understand, first of all, what is our core business? Our core business is not food and beverage. Our core business is dues. We're in the dues business. And those dues have to be spread over a lot of areas. What we tend to do, though, is gravitate to food and beverage being an independent area rather than an amenity. And often in private clubs, food and beverage is an amenity, just like your fitness, just like your curling, just like if we were to run all those independently, and I think that's where you were going with, I think it might have been you, Alan, about looking at a line of business. You'd be surprised that overall, that it's the dues line that's going to balance your budget. And if you try to look at these things independently and you say, okay, we're going to make money on food and beverage. Well, first of all, I'm sorry, but I know a lot of clubs and I know a lot of their models. You're going to have to forego a lot of member events. You're going to have a lot more catering where it is guaranteed numbers. It is guaranteed people coming through this door. And being able to walk in here and you know you have 100 people in this room. You know exactly how much to staff for. You know exactly in advance how much income you're going to get. We don't have that luxury in this club because it's an amenity. And I can trust that goes through all clubs in the GTA, private clubs. Now, because we tend to get into that sort of food and beverage trap where we say, oh, it's $3 million. Well, you know, it's $3 million, but it's a grind to get it there. And you're employing people year round. And as Kevin alluded to, the labor, like we don't have the benefit. Restaurants can pay minimum wage, and those people are paid through tips. We don't have that option. We have a gratuity that's pooled and distributed, at least a portion of it. But the staff here is making much more than minimum wage on balance. So, you know, those are just some of the key factors. I'd be happy to sit down and share it with you, but it's a question often asked. But remember, the key is that our core business is not food and beverage. We're in the dues business. Oh, yeah. Oh, the actual Cabana what was, Jason? The actual Cabana overrun number? So 150,000? I think that was the total. It was $150,000 because we had to change contractors. The next question might be asked, are you going to go after the person originally? The board hasn't decided that, whether there is an opportunity to recover some of those monies. We're doubtful, but there might be.
Hi, this question's for Kevin. It's Shirley Porges. First of all, thank you guys for the presentation. I have been through this, so I know how much work it is, and I appreciate all your hard work. Hey, Kevin, unless something's changed, we don't have segregated funds. So as we increase the capital maintenance fee, how are we assured that that money's actually going to be reserved for capital projects?
Great question, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think now that we've really, brought a lot more attention to this topic, I think there is going to be that greater expectation that if these funds are being, raised, that they're spent in the right direction. So We have to, improve our systems of tracking capital to make sure that, we're not funding, cross-funding, and that the funds are going to their intended use. There may be some years where we overspend, a bit in one category or under the other, but overall, we need to make sure that if people are contributing those funds, that they are going to their proper activity.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Any other questions? No? Yeah, any online? John? No. Okay. Okay, seeing that there are no other questions, I'll close with the fact that, again, appreciate everybody coming out this evening. Appreciate your questions. They are all very fair and honest questions that have been asked and addressed. I think the club is at a watershed moment in its history. I think the future is bright. There will be a lot of conversation with the membership over the next several months. And so I look forward to seeing many of you, all of you in the future, and appreciate your time again. The meeting is adjourned.